I love food, but I've had a bit of a complicated relationship with it ever since I entered my 20s. The focus of this particular video is what I learned about myself in the past 2 or 3 years and how that has helped me be more at peace with my relationship with food. I'm going to give you the summary, the main things that I learned about myself at the beginning of this video before I get too granular about the details. The reason for this is because I did follow all of the exercises and prompts that are in my book, but I know not everyone has the book and not everyone is interested in the book. I have an entire video talking about my food resets and how they really help you tune into yourself rather than relying on external information and external advice. During the food reset, you really hone in on the specific things that you want to work on, and you will know this intuitively as you go through the exercises. The things that I learned about myself during my own food reset might be very different from the things that you learn about yourself if you decide to do a food reset. This is the beauty of tuning into yourself instead of relying on external advice and external shoulds. How many times have we had the best intention to follow a piece of food advice, usually related to health, and for some reason it just doesn't work out for us? That is because we are trying to mold ourselves into something that is maybe an ideal, and we don't actually work on the internal belief system that we have around food. So that is what this reset is. It's more about tuning into yourself than finding an ideal and trying to emulate it or imitate it. I've done this food reset 3 times over the past 2 or 3 years. The first time I did the food reset was in January of 2021. During that food reset, the main themes that came up for me were moderation and processed snacks. So I had trouble with moderation, and I also thought I was having a lot of trouble with processed snacks. Throughout my 20s and 30s, I tried many things that were essentially me trying to cut out processed snacks. So these are things like chips, cookies, chocolate, what you would call junk food. And up until this point, I did feel a lot of guilt and shame about eating junk food. This was actually the first time I realized how severe my guilt and shame was around processed snacks. Throughout my 20s and 30s, I had this belief that I should cut out processed snacks because they should not be a part of my idealized version of myself being a healthy and clean eater. During this food reset, I started to realize how deep this guilt and shame was and how much it was harming my relationship with food. So this was when I started thinking, you know what? Maybe processed snacks can be a part of my life. Maybe by trying to restrict these items in my diet, it's actually making me consume more of it because I am quite extreme when it comes to the sort of thing. I'm either all in or I'm all out, and I wasn't in a place of moderation. And this came up for me over and over and over again during my first food reset. The other thing I realized, because I was playing around with intermittent fasting, which is a practice that works really well for me, it doesn't work well for everyone. This was when I started lengthening my fasting window a little bit more. I'm currently at 18 hours, but I started at 12. And what I realized was because my feeding window was so short, I eat between 12 p.m. and 6 p.m., I was eating a big lunch. And then by dinner time, I wasn't even hungry because not enough time had elapsed, but I was still eating a big meal because I was afraid to be hungry. I was anticipating how I might feel in the evening or maybe the next morning, and I wasn't listening to my hunger and fullness cues. I was ignoring these cues and allowing my brain to project myself forward and saying to myself, well, you're going to be hungry, so you better eat more now. I was very out of touch with my body and how it felt. So those were the items that came up during my first food reset, and what I started doing with intermittent fasting was I started trying to listen to my body a bit better, both in terms of how much to eat and also what to eat. Now I listen to whether I want the processed snacks. For the most part, I do want them, but sometimes I don't. And when I don't want them, I don't have them. Whereas before, I wasn't really eating the things that I wanted to eat. And that's why I was often eating past the point of satiation, because I wasn't feeling satiated, because I wasn't eating what I wanted to eat. That was the first food reset in a nutshell. The second food reset happened in November 2022. So this was almost a 2-year time period in between when I was working on my book and trying to figure things out in terms of setting up the exercises in a way that flowed a bit better. I learned a lot from my first food reset, but I think the way it is now, which is very close to when I did the second reset, it is much more systematic, and there's almost a formula that you can follow with the food chapter as well as all of the other chapters in the book. The main themes for my second food reset were mindful eating and gratitude for all food. By this time, I'd been working on the items in my first food reset for a while, so I had healed a lot of stuff around my relationship with processed snacks. This was also when I stopped using the term junk food, and I started calling these food items processed snacks or convenience foods, and you may have noticed that switch in my verbiage if you watch my vlogs. By this time, I was also much better at listening to my body and practicing moderation, but my big realization during the second food reset was that I was rushing through lunch. I would often eat it in a couple of minutes just to get back to my desk and continue what I was working on. And I wasn't paying attention to what I was eating. I wasn't feeling appreciative for food. I wasn't even really enjoying the food or feeling grateful for food. And that really bothered me. I know I have a lot of privilege when it comes to food because I don't have to grow it myself. I don't have to catch my own food. I basically just go to the grocery store and I buy whatever I feel like buying, or maybe whatever's on sale. So it's quite easy for me to access food because I don't have to put in the time and effort to grow the food myself. And because during this period I realized that I was just scarfing food down without even really thinking about it or caring about it, I felt even more disconnected from food, and I wanted to go back to a time where I really enjoyed eating and found a lot of pleasure in food. So that is what I worked on after my second food reset. I feel like I had solved a lot of my internal struggles with guilt and shame. But now the pendulum had swung far to the other side, where I was really just looking at food as sustenance and not really taking pleasure in it, or as much pleasure. I still took pleasure in food at dinner time, but at lunchtime, that was the meal I was rushing through. Flash forward to the third time I did the food reset, which is this time, November 2023. This is the final version of my book, which is very close to when I did the second reset, just minor tweaks along the way. The main themes that came up for me for my third food reset was looking at food as a form of care, and also realizing that I'm at a place where I have a lot of inner peace about food. This was very interesting to me. Having gone through the food reset twice already, I didn't know what would come up for me. So it felt really good to see that there are still things that come up for me that are new and fresh. One of my main realizations is that I've let go of a lot of my internal struggles with food. I no longer feel guilt or shame about what I eat, but I still feel the need to rationalize or perhaps over-explain my food choices. And I really noticed this when I was doing the pantry video and showing all of the processed snacks I have in one of my cupboards. And because I know that food is a form of care and it's a way to connect with people, I find that when I'm with people, I ignore my sensations of satiation, and again, I consume beyond satiation, whether that be food or alcohol. This is something I knew about myself before, but I didn't connect it with food being a form of care and connection, and I think that's where I really struggle, because I am the type of person who really values harmony, and I also don't want to be perceived as someone who is a party pooper, or who doesn't join in the fun, or who is so rigid with my habits and routines. I tend to go with the flow a lot when I'm with people, and I don't really listen to my own body cues in terms of hunger and fullness. More so fullness is what I choose to ignore. I will sometimes overindulge in food and drink. There's a lot of this social stuff that's happening that affects my relationship with food and how much I consume. I really connected that with me viewing food as a form of care and connection when I did this food reset. Often when I have these realizations, I will swing to the extreme and I will go the other way. As I was going through these exercises, the thought crossed my mind a few times where I was like, you know what? I'm just not gonna have meals with people anymore, except on the very, very rare occasion. I'm not gonna use food to celebrate anymore because I don't want to deal with it. That is my solution a lot of the time, is just I don't want to deal with it, so I'm gonna go the other extreme. But when I was doing the reset this time, I thought to myself, you know what? I do feel like food is a great way to connect with people. I love the topic of food. I want to share in food with people, and I want to talk about food with people. How can I continue to view food as a source of care and connection, but also respect my own body and listen to my inner compass when it comes to food? These are the concepts that I'm trying to integrate within myself, and I'm going to take baby steps, trying each time when I go out with people to listen to my body, listen to myself, but also recognize that sharing a meal together is a way that we are connecting with each other. And I'm going to try to connect with people beyond just using food, because sometimes that feels superficial to me. When food becomes a replacement for deeper connections and more intimate conversations, I leave the gathering feeling very unfulfilled. And that doesn't mean that I need to talk about deep stuff all the time, but I do want to have some connection beyond talking about how good the food is or what we like or dislike about the food. That to me is fun, but surface level, and I want to go a little deeper. So that is something I'm going to work on moving forward. Now that we've talked about what I learned during my food reset, I'm going to dive into my bullet journal and show you all of the spreads that I completed when I was doing the food reset. I reserved a few pages for the setup, the first page being a title page, and I've just put the title of my book. I chose a cloud theme again, which is the same theme that I chose for the setup portion of The Artist's Way in my bullet journal. I love the clouds theme, and it also fits in really nicely with my book. On this spread here, I have a definition, a wish, and 3 questions, and this came out of the introduction of my book. Next, I have a contents page with the 12 chapters in my book, and you'll see that the food chapter has been completed. I ended up putting in the dates for completion, so I started on November 1st and I finished on the 17th. Each chapter takes roughly a month, but you can go faster or slower. I decided to go through the chapter a little bit faster so I could get this video out, and also so I could record the intro for chapter 2, which is the money chapter, and have that posted before the end of the month. You'll notice that I filled in the food cloud with a little bit of color. I'll show you the legend of what the color means in a couple of pages, but for now we'll just notice that it's in a light blue. Next up, I have the principles and tools from my book. There are 4 principles and 4 tools that I wanted to keep in mind as I was working through the Authenblissity Reset. Here is where we have the clouds legend. So the light blue signifies exciting, easy, or fun. I've also got a darker blue signifying neutral, mixed, or indifferent. And then the gray color signifies challenging, overwhelming, or confusing. When I'm done with a chapter, I'm going to decide which color coding represents how I felt about the chapter the best. Because I will be using this bullet journal for my entire Authenblissity Reset, I wanted to come up with some theme ideas that I could reference. The last page in my setup or introduction to the Authenblissity Reset are my goals. These are my goals as a reader and as someone doing the exercises. So the first goal is to complete 1 chapter per month. My second goal is to do no more than 2 to 3 exercises in the explore section. Because I am trying to listen to my inner compass, I thought it was really important that I not do all of the exercises, that I stick to 2 or 3. I really wanted to let go of my tendency to overachieve. My third goal is kind of related to this, and that is to lower the bar and let go of perfection. My fourth goal was to learn one thing about myself each month. And my 5th goal was to maintain my usual levels of self-care. I also added in a quote, and I thought this quote was really important because I have a tendency to do more than what is requested of me. And then I've got a key. This is very standard in bullet journals. And then I've just got little numbers here signifying how many rows there are going up and down the page. There are 37 of those. And then how many columns there are going across the page, and there are 26. find that helps me when I'm trying to section off a page. This is the spread I created for chapter 1 of my book, and that is the food chapter. I decided to draw these cute little vegetables. This is the only time you're going to see them because the theme really became very simple after this. I found that I had a lot of stuff I wanted to write, so that limited the space I had to draw. I also selected a quote. I was going to put a quote from my book, but my inner critic was very active when I was trying to read the personal story. So instead of using a quote from there, I found one online, and this actually worked out so well for me because I love the quote that I chose. This quote encapsulates why I decided to start with the food chapter, so this was a great find. All right, next we've got kind of like a contents page or a list of exercises for all of the exercises that are in this chapter. The reaction exercise is basically reacting to my personal story, and that was very strange for me. I almost skipped this exercise because I had a hard time reading the personal story on the page. As I mentioned, my inner critic was very vocal, so what I did instead was I listened to myself read the personal story. If you buy the book, you have access to the bonus content on my website, and one of the pieces of the bonus content is me reading the introduction, the conclusion, and also the 12 personal stories that are in this book. So what I did was I just played the personal story, the recording of me reading it, and I jotted down my reactions as I listened. And interestingly enough, this quieted my inner critic. I'm not sure why that happened, but I will take it. This is where I really had that aha moment about how much food is a source of care and connection, and how food can almost be a replacement for deeper levels of connection. And this aha moment that came up during the reaction exercise, it was a thought that had a huge ripple effect on where this chapter went for me. My word cloud ended up being more of a word tree, and what I ended up doing was kind of like an above the surface, below the surface sort of dynamic. Then came the pendulum exercise. For this exercise, we try to decide where on the pendulum we fall between two statement pairs. So what I did, instead of jotting down the statement pairs, I printed out the worksheet that's a companion to this book. And again, this is part of the bonuses that you get on my website if you purchase the book. So I printed out that section and I just cut it to size, and I did the exercise that way because I didn't really want to write everything down again when it was already in an easy to use format. And then along the line, I put the little dot of where I thought I was, and then I wrote some notes about it. Moving into the observe section, I observed myself for 7 days, and I'll just flip through quickly what that looks like. I had some room at the bottom of the page after my 7th day of observation. So what I ended up doing was drawing my favorite meals this week. After the week of observation, I did the patterns exercise and I just jotted down some thoughts around that. Basically just some sentence stems that I expanded on. And then we moved into the explore section. So this is where we pick 2 or 3 exercises to complete. Before I started the food chapter, I was already anticipating that I was going to do the pantry exercise because I was really looking forward to it. And I thought I would end up doing 3 exercises because I am an overachiever, so I want to do more. And the exercises I thought I was going to do were pantry, categories, and technology. So I did end up doing pantry, and that was very, very helpful. It was exactly what I needed. I have a whole video on that, so I won't go into detail here, but I ended up dedicating an entire spread, so 2 pages, to the pantry exercise. And then I also added a spread where I'm going to make some notes on my 2023 advent calendar. I ended up using a lot of pantry treats for this, and as I open the advent calendar, I want to jot down what treats I find and also make some notes, and that's why I've left the space at the bottom for how I felt about using pantry snacks for the advent calendar and whether I would do it again. I was feeling a lot of resistance after completing the pantry exercise. What I ended up doing was I thought about that aha moment I had at the beginning of the chapter when I was doing the reaction exercise in terms of food as a replacement for care and connection. I read the descriptions again for each of the exercises in the explore section, and the one that really spoke to me as being relevant was nourishment. So this is the exercise that I did. I ended up writing a page of notes on that, and the main through line for types of nourishment that I find in food, there has to be pleasure and I also have to have variety. So those are the two things that really came up for me in this exercise. Even if I eat something because it is quote unquote good for me, and it is something that gives me physical nourishment or nutrition, I still have to have that mental and emotional nourishment from it. I still have to enjoy it. So this really speaks to how much I view food as a source of pleasure. And I realize that I very rarely eat things now that I don't thoroughly enjoy, and that actually made me feel really good. The connect section is the most difficult section, and I have an advantage because not only did I write these exercises, I also have done them several times. I'm not going to go through all of these because I've already talked about the lessons that I learned at the beginning of this video, but I did all 5 exercises. In terms of memories, instead of jotting down all of my memories and things that I could remember, I selected 3 to expand on. Then I did the disentangling exercise, and I chose again a few key beliefs that I have about food, and I examined those in a deeper way. Perceptions and perspective I ended up putting on 1 page. In 1 column, I jotted down a few of the things my inner critic is still telling me about food, and in the facing column, I wrote down how my inner best friend would respond to these criticisms. Interconnections was also a full page of writing, lots to explore there, and interconnections is actually one of my favorite exercises. It's a bit tedious, but I always enjoy it. The last section of my book is the reflect section, and there are 3 exercises. Pendulum redux is essentially the same exercise as pendulum, but in this exercise we determine where we are between 5 different dualities. So these aren't the same statement pairs, they're all different. I did the same thing for this exercise as I did for pendulum, where I printed off the worksheet and I cut the exercise down to size. Looking up is another exercise that I get a lot out of. Because I've practiced this so much in terms of doing a bunch of experiments and setting goals throughout the years, I've gotten really good at looking ahead to what I want for my future self and then bringing it back to things I could do today that will lead me in that direction. And these are all tiny, tiny, tiny things. I'm not expecting to change overnight. They're just small things that nudge me in that direction. So this exercise was about that. The last exercise in this chapter is the treasures exercise. These are a series of sentence stems that you can use to draw out all of the little nuggets that you might have learned about yourself throughout the chapter. So I really love this exercise as well because it allows me to flip through and really consolidate all of my ideas and aha moments and things I might want to try. I had 1 more page before I shifted gears to the money chapter. I decided to do a summary page, and this is where I mapped out what I learned about myself the 3 times that I did the food reset. And I think I'm going to do this for every chapter because I find it really helpful to have a record of this. That is it for this video. If you watched till the end, thank you so much. I know this was a long one. Let me know down below if you've taken a peek at the food reset at all, or if it's something that you're interested in trying. Even if you don't have the book, or if you're not interested in the book, I would love to hear a little bit about your journey with food and things that you've learned about yourself. That is going to be it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I will be back very soon with the introduction to my money reset. I am so excited for that chapter. I need that chapter in my life right now. That will be posted before the end of this month. Until I see you in that video, please take care and bye for now.